Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Michel de Montaigne begins his short essay that we should not be deemed happy till after our death by considering an old story that goes all the way back to Herodotus and would have been familiar to pretty much any educated person of his time, and maybe you have heard of it as well. It has to do with the advice that was given by the wise person Solon to one of the richest kings and more powerful kings in the world, Cyrus of Lydia, who unfortunately went up against a yet more powerful king. He didn't know it at the time, Cyrus, coming to be known later as Cyrus the Great of Persia. So we get this story that's being referenced here about King Croesus having been taken by Cyrus and condemned to death. He cried out as he awaited execution, "Oh, Solon," right? And so Cyrus is kind of curious. He's like, what's this guy talking about? And so he asks him, what's going on here? And Croesus says, Solon told me that things could turn out this way. He says Solon had once given him a warning, which was now proving true to his own cost. So what's that warning? Well, it's an interesting, is it philosophical? Well, we'll look at that in a moment, but an interesting warning about considering people happy, making a judgment about who's actually fortunate or doing well. He says, don't call people happy until after they've died. And in the Herodotus story, there's a couple examples given. Montaigne is going to give his own examples. So it says, no matter how fortune may smile upon you, don't call somebody happy till you've seen them pass through the last day of their life. Why? Well, because there is uncertainty, incertitude in Montaigne's French, and mutability, changeability, variété, right? The word we get variety from, but meaning the possibility of going otherwise in human affairs and everything that concerns us. And this is what the ancients, medievals, early moderns called fortune, fortuna, the capacity to the wheel to go up, but also to go down. And we're probably cooler with fortune when things are going up than when they're going down. And so they shift easily, these human affairs, from state to state. And so we see some interesting examples. That's why Asigalaus replied to someone who called the king of Persia, at that time the most powerful king in the world, happy because he'd come to so young to so great an estate. Well, sure, but King Priam was not wretched when he was that age. Now, who's Priam? Well, he is the king of Troy, who is discussed in the Iliad, gets to see his son destroyed in battle by Achilles and then dragged behind his chariot, has to go as a suppliant to the tent of his enemy and beg for his son's body back, right? That's pretty terrible. Then he sees his city destroyed as well. Descendants of Alexander the Great, themselves kings of Macedon, became cabinet makers and scriveners in Rome. And he gives a number of examples like this. So we often say, how the mighty have fallen. So these are the mighty. And because human affairs are mutable, they can change quite a bit. He says, during our own father's lifetime, the 10th Duke of Milan, who had been the driving force in Italy, died as a prisoner, right? After living there 10 years. The fairest queen, widow of the greatest king in Christendom, has she not just died by the hand of the executioner? And he says there's hundreds of other examples. What do these examples show us? Just as storms and tempests seem to rage against the haughty, arrogant height of our buildings, so it could seem that there's spirits above us envious of any greatness here below. So he actually concludes very interestingly, fortune sometimes lies in ambush for a person's last day. And they could actually say, as he points out, oh man, if only I had died yesterday, everything would be great. But today, it's all gone to crap, as we might say in the present. So Solon is giving some useful advice. Things go up, things go down. Human beings, our affairs often change. But is that really what Solon wanted to point out? Here's where the essay takes a very interesting turn. So Montaigne is taking this old trope about fortune, and he's saying, Solon was a philosopher. He's not really going to be giving advice about the mutability of human, conditions because of fortune. He says, the favors and ill graces of fortune, the happiness or unhappiness that we're going to have, great honors and powers, these sorts of things are non-essential properties counted, as he says, virtually à peu près in French, as things indifferent. So worldly prosperity, wealth, power, attractiveness, things going along in what we call success, that's rather indifferent. That doesn't make our life happy or miserable. What actually makes us happy? So he says, well, for somebody like Solon, happiness is going to depend on tranquility and contentment of a well-born spirit. So tranquility and contentment, being okay with how things are. And then resolution and assurance of what he's going to call an ordered soul. So we've got 4 different traits here, all of which are, recognizable as important in the virtue ethics of different philosophers who Montaigne has studied, whether they be Stoics like Seneca or Epictetus, whether they be Platonists like Plutarch, or whether they be people who blend these things together like Cicero, right? These are the things that happiness genuinely depends on. So you might think, well, that means that fortune can't touch me, right? And so long as I continue on my well-established way, I'm going to be happy. And he says, no. Solon is telling us that can change too. So he says that we shouldn't attribute this happiness to any person until their last day, when they are dying, when they are acting out the last scene in the play, which is indubitably the hardest of the scenes. Why? Well, because until we face our death, we can pretend. We can, as he says, wear an actor's mask. Those fine philosophical arguments that we make might only be a pose. Whatever else befalls us might not assay us, test us to the quick, allowing us to keep our countenance serene. So these traits, tranquility, contentment, resolution, assurance, do you really have what it takes to maintain those in the face of your own death, is the question. And he says, this is where we actually get to check things, right? In this last scene being acted out between us and death, we come clean. As he's going to say here, there's a wonderful translation, we speak straightforward French. Now, the original just says, that we speak François, right? We actually speak French instead of what? Speaking Latin, speaking in an elevated way. We talk our own language. And he goes on and says, we must show whatever's good and clean in the bottom of the pot. Meaning, there's no hiding the stuff at this point. The mask is ripped off, he says. Reality, or the affair itself, res, remains. And so he says this is why we have to look to the final day and the final deed of a person. It is the master day, the day which judges all the others. It is, says one of the ancients, the day which must judge all my years now past. The test of the fruits of my studies is postponed unto death. And here's a wonderful phrase as well. Then we'll see if my arguments come from my lips or from my heart, whether I walk the proverbial walk, right? So we have to see what people are like on their last day. And he says, some people have given a good or bad reputation to their entire life in how it was that they died. He's going to bring up one prime example of somebody, Scipio, Pompey's father-in-law, who redeemed by a good death the poor opinion people had had of him until then. Right? But there's also bad guys, people he calls, execrable and, ill-famed men that I have known, men plunged into every kind of abomination, right? So these are really, really bad guys. These are villains. But they can have a good death if God allows it, as he's going to say. This was God's good pleasure. They died deaths that were well ordered and in all respects perfectly reconciled. Now, Montaigne isn't saying this is unfair or this is fair or anything like that. He's just saying this is the way things go. And then he brings up another interesting example. Some deaths, he says, are fine, in the French brave, and fortunate. And he talks about a man who, and this is his good friend Etienne de la Boétie, whose life was progressing towards brilliant preferment when it was snapped. His end was so splendid that his great-souled search after honor held nothing so sublime as that snapping asunder. The goal he aimed for, he reached even before he had set out. That was more grand and more glorious than anything he'd wished or hoped for. As he fell, he surpassed the power and reputation towards which his course aspired. There are some people whose deaths transcend the person themselves. Now, Montaigne is going to end this by actually talking about his own death. Now, of course, he doesn't know his own death because it hasn't happened yet. He can't write about it now, can he? So he says, when judging another person's life, I look to see how its end was born. And he's going to end with this final sentence. One of my main concerns for my own is that it be born well. What does that count as? We go back to these traits that a philosopher would have. That is, in a quiet and muted manner, a way that displays a being okay with dying, not trying to bargain it away or getting angry or anything like that. Now, that's a hope for himself. He can't know until he actually gets there. But very interesting use of this, by this time, long-standing trope about not judging anybody happy until after their death, and looking at how a philosopher might reinterpret that.